So it is a privilege for me to be introducing my longtime friend, James Halpern. James and I worked together in the psychology department at SUNY New Paltz since 2000, and he was there slightly before as well. And
a couple of decades.
And you know, when you're a junior worker in whatever context, you always look to some kind of mentor, someone who's maybe a little bit older than you, that knows the ropes, who has good perspective on things. That last part is the hard part to find. And James Halpern has always been exactly that guy, and he has always put things in extraordinary perspective. And I think my own career has benefited extraordinarily from being able to work with this guy. When the Twin Towers came crashing down in 2001, James Halpern was there within hours, leading the mental health effort, and it was a major mental health effort because there were so many people, as we remember. Was my brother there? Where's my sister? Who's alive? Who's not? The amount of grief and disaster was beyond comprehension. And James and his team ended up being the people that did their best to help those people on the front lines at that point. Within about a year after that, SUNY New Paltz started, under James's direction, the world-renowned Institute for Disaster Mental Health. We hold an annual conference each year that brings people from all over the place. We have a conference in April 27th, and we hope that people from the community here can come. This year's topic is going to be on
mass violence.
On mass violence, right? So, for better or worse, this issue is obviously on the front of people's minds. James also was actually a leader in the mental health effort at Sandy Hook. For better or worse, James emerged as someone who's a true leader in this field and has been called in for all kinds of things, and has made a huge difference for people at some of the most difficult times that we can think of in recent history. And I'm pleased to have James come up and talk about gun violence, a public health crisis.
So Glenn gave me a pretty good introduction, I have to say. The only piece that I wanted to add, actually, to that introduction is that it was in 1995 that Oklahoma City bombing occurred. And I was watching CNN, horrified, probably like most of you. A couple of young faces, maybe you don't remember, but most of you do. And I heard that there were crisis counselors and grief counselors, and I wondered who they were and how they got on the scene, and discovered that it was really, for the most part, Red Cross. And that was really where and when the field began, in the 90s. And I thought, gee, the next time something like this happens, I want to be able to do something about it and contribute to the healing rather than watch it on TV, which is why you're all here. You know, and that's partly why when I began and said I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, that's very much a part of it. So as Glenn noted, I played a leadership role on September 11th, escorting families of firefighters down to Ground Zero, managing the missing persons hotline, were some of the more notable things that the work that we did, and then began trying to develop ways through the university to get people trained so that they would know what they were doing and could be effective responders. I would say all of the work that I did, nothing was harder than the work at Sandy Hook. That was the hardest. And in fact, there was a small group of us who assisted families there. And what I spoke to parents and grandparents and siblings, and the complexities of the response is not really for us to be talking about. That's in a lecture to social workers and mental health counselors and psychologists, what to do and how to do it well. So I'm going to spare you all of that. But I will say this, you know, as much as the media talks about these families and others after the Parkland shooting and others as being strong and resilient, and it's true that they are, but they are not okay. They are suffering and they are grieving. They were and they are and they will be. And again, just for a moment, thinking about what it would be like knowing that a family member was executed the way those kids were, you know you're not ever going to be okay. And I have to say that I feel as though all of us in my profession have been negligent in terms of not doing more around issues of prevention. And from a mental health perspective, that's what we need to do more of. And there's so much that we actually can do rather than just coming in afterwards and assisting with the trauma. How can we prevent the trauma? So, you know, some of the, I should note that domestic terrorism, like Oklahoma City, it's over in the last 10 years, more than 70% of terrorist acts committed by right-wing terrorists, not Islamic, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. The vast majority, in fact, are occurred in this way. And then, you know, to see these scenes at Sandy Hook with these kids holding on to one another, closing their eyes so that they aren't exposed to the gruesome images, and that then again, almost the same image that occurs in Parkland as these kids exit the schools. So what is this about? We have a very significant public health crisis in the United States, so far out of line, by far the most gun deaths by homicide, suicide, mass shootings, mass killings, and typically the statistics don't even include gun injuries. Although we have less than 5% of the world population, we have over 30% of mass shootings. Where do they occur? This is a chart from the FBI. I apologize, the slide isn't so great as I try to blow it up a bit. But most occur in the workplace. Most of you can probably remember the expression going postal because some of the events occurred that way. But you can see almost a quarter take place in schools, others take place in government buildings, healthcare facilities, churches, open spaces, and so forth. These mass shootings are widespread and seem to be occurring now with great regularity. Depending on when you do these, you look at the statistics, it almost appears that mass shootings are happening almost every day. And school shootings recently once a week. This is an American problem. It is a peculiarly American problem, and if you look at the numbers as the American Journal of Medicine did as recently as 2016, comparing gun deaths in the US to 22 other developed countries, lumping all those 22 countries together, their population is 1.5 or twice the size of ours, and yet you're 10 times more likely to be shot to death in this country than those countries combined. You see about 90% of women, children, young people, and so forth. And the phrase that I like best that summarizes these statistics is that violent gun deaths in the United States are similar to those in war-torn countries and failed states. That's the seriousness of this problem. Yemen, Syria, Iraq. That's where you have to go to be in as much danger as you are in the US. Extraordinary problem. Some of the inadequate explanations, I have to say, one of the most upsetting things to me, and one of the things that made me most angry and still does, is when I hear people say that this isn't really happening, that it's a hoax. And so you have people like Alex Jones on InfoWars and some of his followers who are right now trolling the families of Sandy Hook and Parkland and threatening them. This is beyond outrageous in terms of a crime. I was at Sandy Hook when, in fact, Westboro Baptist Church came to say that it was God's will for those children to be shot in Connecticut as punishment for gay marriage. Again, I don't know, as a clinical psychologist, I tend to control my feelings, but man, that stuff I find absolutely outrageous. Can we possibly explain this disproportionate number of gun deaths in the US with these other explanations? Obviously not. There's plenty of violent video games and violent movies in Europe and Asia. It's the same number that we have, yet they don't have the gun deaths. We are not more mentally ill than other countries. There's no evidence for the fact that listen, I would like to see there be more support for mental health. I would love to see that. I think it's needed. It certainly wouldn't hurt, but it's not going to touch the issues of gun deaths here. And then the issue, of course, is that what we need to do is harden our schools and have more good people with guns. If more guns was helpful, we would have the safest rather than the most dangerous country. And those are just the facts. So, Adam Langford's a sociologist who correlated gun deaths with gun ownership. And of course, that's the predictor. We have 3 million guns, and the problem now is, I was just saying, that even somebody who I would consider a right-wing extremist, the late Scalia, noted that the Second Amendment doesn't give everybody the right to have as many guns as they want to use them for what. Even that guy said that the policy that we have in place now is insane, and that's the current policy, that's the current laws nationally and so forth. So, yeah, you can now go online or go to a private, again, this is what's sometimes referred to as the gun show loophole, which essentially means that about 1/3 of the gun purchases in this country occur with no background check. None. So you could be a convicted felon and a wife beater and all of that, and you can go buy as many assault weapons as you want. And that can occur. Then some of these issues about congressional, I want to say, by the way, I started to look at, I didn't make an appropriate segue. I worked with those families, and that certainly motivated many of them to get more involved in this issue. And it motivated me to look into this. You know, I felt as though I was honoring my connection to those families by trying to get a sense of what is going on, what is the nature of this madness. So here are 2 congressional acts. Do you know that gun manufacturers are the only manufacturers in this country who are protected from lawsuit? That's insane. And the Dickey Amendment, and by the way, he now regrets this, that keeps the CDC essentially from allowing there to be government-funded NIMH and NIH research to look into the causes of gun violence. They had done some research in 94, 95, which showed very clearly that you're much more at risk with a gun at home, so that the idea of having a gun at home for protection is not real, you know, it's false. And so once they saw that, it seemed to undercut the argument that we need guns at home for protection, since it puts you more at risk. And thus the Dickey Amendment. So we don't need to do any more research, we don't need to find the facts, we need to hide from the facts. So what can we do? And I'm closing. Obviously, these amendments need to be repealed, protecting gun manufacturers and repealing the Dickey Amendment, and then doing whatever we can to keep folks from getting as many guns, however many guns, whoever they are, and so forth. What's called common sense safety regulations. I think we do better avoiding gun control and saying gun safety. Just sounds a little bit better. People don't like to be controlled, even though it really is what we're doing. And so you can find some of these recommendations in lots of places. This is from the Giffords Law Center. This is Gabby Giffords. And of course, background checks on all gun purchases, licenses, and some of these licensing laws that they have in different states, making sure that people pass all kinds of tests, take safety classes, are interviewed and so forth, registering these firearms, regulating firearm dealers, In most states, if you lose firearms, you don't have to report that, so they're all over the place. No one knows where they are or in whose hands they are, and so forth. And finally, we know that we can rally and we can march and we can talk, but unless we elect folks who are committed to gun licensing laws, nothing's going to change. Oh, I will say one other thing. You know, in following the events after Sandy Hook, which was 2012, it was 2013, we came very close. So I want to be a little bit encouraging here. Congress passed universal background checks, and the Senate fell just a few votes short of 60. There was something like 4 votes short of 60, because they weren't using, we have folks here who would know this stuff better than me, where maybe if they used reconciliation, like the Republicans did to pass the tax bill and others, they could have passed the universal background checks. But they were close. They were really quite close. And again, if we can elect folks who get an F from the NRA, or maybe a D-, something like that, you know? If we make that the passing grade, the D-. But people who will protect American lives rather than gun manufacturers, maybe we'll get somewhere. So thank you for letting me
Yeah. I have a question. You talk about not using the word gun control and sort of framing the arguments in a way that doesn't push people perhaps to dig in on the other side. But I wonder if it's ultimately counterproductive to sort of walk on eggshells around people who don't seem to want to reason for the most part. And being that we're in a sort of a cultural war, frankly, at this point in our society and our country, shouldn't we be a little more tough, perhaps? As a psychologist, I wonder what your thoughts are.
No, and I don't have a great answer. I mean, I think my impression is that we have more allies than you might think. So it's something like more than 95% of the country wants to see universal background checks. The majority of gun owners want to see universal background checks. You know, we have law enforcement want to see universal background checks and licensing. So where we sometimes think we don't have allies, we actually do. And so the idea of trying to shame them or something like that, I don't think is the best strategy. I think we have folks who we can work with. Example that I often use around the CDC, that there was a time when kids were drowning in pools. CDC looked at it and discovered that if there were fences around pools, kids wouldn't drown. So they established some safety features and regulations rather than controls, and required people to have a fence around the pool. And you can say that in a kind of harsh, punishing way, but you can say, look, we want to protect the lives of these kids, so let's everybody, and suddenly the drowning stopped, you know. I think we need to be very strong. I certainly feel this way, you know, to do all that we can. But I think we can do it in a way as to not alienate. There are a lot of folks who hunt and do stuff like that. Let's be okay with that. It's just my opinion.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just a question of opinion, and I'm all for getting rid of assault weapons, but I have 2 sons that grew up through adolescence, and in their past, they had these video games called first-person shooters. And kids would be glued to these video games for hours on end and get agitated when I tried to get them off. I definitely am not against assault, but don't you think that the video games situation of first-person shooters should be addressed a little bit also?
Well, you know, just like I said, I want to see support for mental health issues. I don't think these video games are great. I think one of our elected officials said maybe we should start rating these movies and video games.
Especially because
yeah, but they are rated. And again, the fact that there are the same video games and movies in other developed countries, and yet we don't see any of these deaths, makes it pretty clear to me that it's about the accessibility of guns. So again, to see those movies and then be able to have 10 assault weapons with no checks, that's...
But the video games are putting...
Yeah, I don't like them.
Right.
But I think that the danger there is that it can shift the focus.
But it wouldn't hurt to bring it up.
Okay.
Machine gun.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you, Joe.
Listen, at my age, I play these video games, and I have no desire to go out and kill people after I finish the game.
You just want to shoot film.
That's it. You know, but it relieves a lot of frustration. You know, when I come off the game, I'm tired. I don't want to do any kind of killing after that. You know, so I don't put too much emphasis on those games. I think we have a more serious problem that is aside the games.
I'm hoping all the adolescents think just like you.
Well, I'm hoping also.
Let's make sure that we do all we can to elect the kind of folks who are going to do something about this, okay?
We'll take one last question, Lisa.
So there have been some reports, some authors have said that the mass shootings, I totally agree with everything you said, but since you're a social psychologist, that the mass shootings are a symptom of the alienation that people feel in our society, that, you know, the end of the capitalist era, or, you know, just a decline of our social fabric. Could you just respond to that?
I would have to say not easily, because once again, if we look at the data as it relates to all of the other developed countries, there are some of those same issues occurring in other countries as here. I will say, you know, that we can do better at identifying some of these kids, there is some evidence that suggests that these kids are posting about this, giving us fair warning that they're particularly alienated. But look, you know, we all went to school where there was bullying, you know, where we were resentful, where we were bitter, but somehow without that availability of guns, there's a lot of imitation that can occur as well, as some of these shooters try to outdo one another. And again, I'm always reluctant to blame the media these days, but you know, I don't think they should use their names, and I don't think they should be getting the attention, because I think that's part of the draw of this. So that's not quite an answer to your question, but a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we're petition time. If you're a registered Democrat, you may have already signed a petition for one of our candidates. The field seems to continue to grow, which I don't know. Personally, I am not very happy about that, but that's just my personal opinion. We do have all the petitions available. Well, we have 6 petitions, I'll say that. 6 petitions available in the back if anybody is interested in signing a petition. But we are in petition season, and one of our candidates asked if he could join us today because there's some connection to our group. As a group, we are not formally endorsing, and I personally know in this room people have signed different petitions, and this is not meant to be an endorsement, but we're certainly always happy to have a candidate to come and spend a little time with us and give us some updates. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian Flynn.
I feel so far away. Thank you all for being here. As many of you know, my entire campaign started in this room. And it started when we were talking about, somebody asked a question here back in January, I think it was. Somebody asked a question, why didn't we win the congressional election? And the person who was answering the question is somebody who trains activists, someone named Leslie Brilliant, who is here today with us. And Leslie described the type of candidate who could win in this district. And many of the things that she said resonated with me. And I decided to pursue it, and then filed and decided to run, and was the first person to file to run because of this room and you people here. So thank you very much. I also want to thank the youth that were here earlier. They're inspiring to me. And it was so great to get to spend a little bit of time with them because they have I was telling Sarah was telling Sarah, she has the responsibility of saving the Republic. But you got this, no problem. But thank you all for being here. I want to give you a quick update because many of you have heard me speak in the past, so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about where we are. As I travel around, I keep hearing people say they don't recognize their country anymore. They feel as if democracy itself is under attack. They see the rise of white nationalism, the kids here mentioned that, and the threat of authoritarianism right here in America. They feel as if they have friends and neighbors who previously voted for Barack Obama, now voting for Donald Trump. So the question is, how did we get here? How did this happen? Because Trump is not the cause. He's the result. It's because for decades we've ignored the American worker and the economic pain and anxiety that they've been living with. For decades we've allowed small towns and rural communities, especially north and west of here, to continue to fall behind. For decades we've paid women a fraction of what they're owed, and we've done worse by communities of color. We've continued to mistreat and marginalize our immigrant and LGBTQ friends. So we didn't just push people down, we kept them there. And that is exactly the pain that Trump preyed upon and got him elected. So if you want to stop Trump, you have to address the underlying issues that got us here. And that is why I'm running. That's why I have a bold plan that addresses these issues. And it's my plan for the American worker. And it's not just about creating jobs. It's also about addressing those barriers that have kept people behind. And it starts with Medicare for All, which I've advocated for since 2004. It's about investments that put us at the epicenter of a clean energy revolution. It's criminal justice reform, including legalization of marijuana, because we have to address the racial and economic inequities in our criminal justice system. It's comprehensive immigration reform, as I spoke to the youth about, not just DACA, but providing a path to citizenship and legalization for all undocumented people in America. It's also policies that enable and empower women in the workforce and finally end this culture of assault on the rights of women and girls. Women hit the height in the workforce over 20 years ago, and we've been undermining them ever since. The assault on women's reproductive rights is not only an assault on their human rights, it's an assault on their economic freedom. And we need to do something about that now. We're decades, if not centuries, late. It's also investments in infrastructure, digital infrastructure, transportation, but also housing infrastructure, and the associated water and sewer infrastructure as well, because often we forget about that part. And it's investments in public education and prioritizing public education, but also rethinking training for the jobs that exist today. Now, that's a lot of stuff. That's a big plan. So you're thinking, all right, we're going to need the right candidate that can address all those issues. And there are a lot of great candidates in this race, and I've gotten to know all of them, and I would be honored by having any one of them represent us. But I know I'm the right candidate, because I'm the only candidate who's been a lifelong progressive Democrat and activist and who's advocated for Medicare for All since 2004. And I'm the only candidate who's created blue-collar American jobs. And I'm the only candidate who's been to Washington and gotten legislation passed. And I'm the only candidate that has a plan that addresses all these issues. But I'm not the right candidate just because of the things that I've done. More importantly, it's because of what I've learned by doing them. I've learned that when ordinary people come together in rooms like this, when those kids come together in rooms like this, when ordinary people come together, they can accomplish extraordinary things against impossible odds. Now look, when my brother was killed by terrorists in 1988, like those kids down in Florida, I was just a teenager. But in that moment, everything changed. So together, with other families, we went after major corporations, we went after special interests, we even went after our own government, and we didn't stop until justice was done. Coming together, not apart. That's the American ideal. It's that seemingly impossible goal of becoming truly indivisible. Now Donald Trump, John Faso, and Paul Ryan, they've used income inequality and despair to fuel division. Sure, they've passed policies to help their wealthy donors while at the same time exploiting our fears and worries, pitting us one against the other. Well, I say with this election, with the work that you're doing, let's say no more. Like those brave students in Florida, like women fighting as part of the Me Too movement, like unions fighting for $15 an hour, which joined together to achieve economic justice. Let's take away their fuel of division. Because our job, as activists, as people in this room, as Democrats, as Americans, is to actually build a country where people just don't survive, but thrive. Because that's the promise of America. So join the campaign. Be a part of it. Sign a petition. Pick a horse. Have some fun. Let's build an America that works for all of us. Thank you so much for being here today. I'd love to take any questions. Many of you have heard me before, but any questions about policy or issues? Anything? Yes, sir.
How do you feel about corporations?
Well, I think 50 or 15,000 small corporations in this district that create a lot of jobs and do a lot. And there are a lot of big corporations who are not in this district who are raping our country. So I think we have to finally take on the corporate special interest, including pharmaceutical, big agriculture, big energy, who are tearing apart our country. And let's get the power back to the people. My entire campaign is about that. And one of the first things I want to do, specifically for agriculture, especially that affects communities like this, is to bring antitrust legislation against big agriculture, who controls 70% of the input costs. Yes?
If we want to support you, where can we get a petition?
So there's a petition here, and there's a petitioner who's standing right there. I love the sound of that. But yes, we'll take signatures today, and we'd like everyone to carry a petition. We can do that as well, and Leslie can help you with that. Other questions?
How do you feel about John Faso?
John Faso is a formidable competitor, and we cannot take him lightly. He is very good at pivoting and doublespeak. But what I really like is the contrast of John Faso, a career politician and lobbyist, against a scrappy progressive activist who's created hundreds of blue-collar American jobs and who's also been to Washington and gotten legislation passed. I can't wait to face him.
God bless you.
Could you just kind of update everybody on the timeline? Like I said, we're in petition season, but you want to just do some of the logistical pieces
Sure.
for everyone?
So, and this is important. So, as Devin mentioned earlier, the primary is on June 26th. We only have a few weeks left of petitioning. We love petitioning because you get out there and talk to voters. So, sign a petition, but also carry one and go out and help us talk to voters. And even if you run into someone who's not a Democrat who can't sign your petition, engage in the conversation. I know that's inefficient for getting a petition signed. I've been quite inefficient in my petition signing because I actually spend time talking to NOPs and Republicans. So they actually think I'm the worst signature getter on the team. But it's a great way for us to engage. So please make a choice, sign a petition, and help us carry petitions and get everyone on the ballot so we can have fun. I think primaries are great. I think we're all getting better because of it. I think the best person will emerge. The only concern I have is if people don't get involved and pick a horse and allow the most electable person to get to the top, then it could be a concern. And right now, they are all great candidates. It's interesting. I told you a little bit about the things that distinguish me, but it's interesting. There are 4 issues that matter to the general electorate. And those issues are jobs, especially for the 70% of people in this district who do not have college degrees. It's healthcare, it's public education, and it's the environment. And I'm the only candidate running who has explicit experience in all 4 of those areas, in every one of those areas. And I think I'm the only one who has experience in any one of those areas. So if we're looking at what's going to help us win the general, we better be able to line up against John Faso with someone who can talk to those issues throughout the district. Yes? Hi.
Fine. When is the next debate between all of you?
It's every 20 minutes. So, we have one this afternoon. There's another forum. It's interesting. People look for debates. I'm not sure debates are going to be that helpful. On the issues, I'm not sure. There is some there's 2 people who aren't really for Medicare for all. The rest of us are. So, all right, that's a short conversation. I don't think it's as much as debate. I think what people should do is actually do more of these types of things, which is Q&A and talk to people. There are forums. There's one this afternoon up in Rensselaer where we're each speaking for a period of time and doing this type of thing. I think that's the way to do it because, to be honest, in the general election, you only have 1 debate, maybe 2. Faso might have 0. I have a funny feeling if I'm the nominee, he's going to choose 0 debates. So there are a bunch coming up. We have them on our website. Most of them we've done, but I think there's 1 debate planned. But I don't know how a debate's going to go. You know, I'm really for Medicare for all, and how are you going to?
Right.
What's the substance? Then I'm afraid it would become ad hominem and becomes personal attacks because what else? If you agree on
Well,
issues.
I mean, I've been to them, or I've seen them straight,
Yeah.
and there hasn't really been too much of a difference, but, I mean, I have seen a little mudslinging, which I don't like.
You know what? But the good thing about mudslinging, which I accept, I get hit with a lot of it. One, being Irish, I'm used to it. I learned to take a punch early because of my big mouth. And it's okay. It's okay. I mean, I would prefer if we didn't do it, but it's great because I hired a Oppo research firm to do Oppo research on myself because I take this very seriously. So I knew everything that was out there, even things I didn't know. So nothing came unexpected, and all of it is explainable. When they lie and twist things, okay. But let's be clear: don't choose a candidate because you think they have the fewest negatives, because everyone will be Swift voted, and everyone would be Willie Horton, whatever his name is. So. Mike Dukakis and John Kerry, two of the most boring people on the planet, both got destroyed by negative advertising. The key is which candidate can take it, keep going, and actually has the charisma, the platform, the experience, and the disposition in order to take negative and come right back out.
So what are your negatives?
What's that?
You know your negatives. Right?
Sure. One of the negatives I didn't, like 70% of the voters in this district, I wasn't born and bred in the district, but that is 70% of the voters were not. So, but it is something that people talk about. I've been living here since 2003 in Greene County, but I haven't lived here full time. I actually transitioned up here over time, like a lot of people. And I started about 6 years ago, and I finished it about a year and a half ago. So people, John Fassel might say, oh, you're a carpet, which he did say was a carpetbagger. But the funny part about it is I'm the third generation of my family to choose Greene County as my home. And anybody who's been to Greene County would realize nobody would choose to move to Greene County as a Democrat to run for office 14 years later. And also my great uncle, my family had deep roots as laborers in the area, and my grandfather's a bartender in the Irish Catskills, and my great uncle has a museum. He's a famous transit union leader called Michael J. Quill. There's a museum in the district named after him. And in fact, there was an article on me yesterday in the Irish Echo for the one of you in the room who might subscribe to me. But what's great about that is when he attacks me on it, I'm going to say, John, my family's been here since the 1940s. There's a museum in Greene County named after. It's not going to work. My daughter goes to local public school. We couldn't be happier. And being from Greene County is quite an advantage because it's Faso Corner in that northwest corner. There are a lot of votes up there. I've been to Otsego over 30 times. We're going to get votes up there. I've also been here many, many times, as you guys know. But we're going to get votes in that corner of the district. The other issue comes up because I've been a business person who's created hundreds of jobs in New York and around the country. I've been forced, like a lot of other businesses, to make tough decisions. And I moved one of my businesses from Western New York to a different location. But it's the same reason that a lot of people have to move businesses, because we haven't invested in rail infrastructure that enables you to get goods from one location to another in a timely manner. So, and in fact, a farmer up in Hartwick in Otsego County told me the same thing. He had to shut down his farm because Reagan actually had destroyed the rail infrastructure back in the 1980s. So we had to do that. It was a tough decision. The employees were part of the decision. Many of them chose to move. The employees were very well trained. They moved elsewhere. And because we made that move, we've actually been able to grow the number of jobs that we've created. In fact, many union jobs we've been able to add to our company, which has been great in Pennsylvania, as a matter of fact. So that negative is positive. Here's what I love about John Faso attacking me on this. See, John Faso not once in his career has ever voted for any investment in rail infrastructure. Not once. Now, I shouldn't have had to make that decision, and the farmer shouldn't have made that decision. So when he attacks me on it, which I can't wait for, say, hey, John, you've had opportunities. You've been in politics for 30 years. You were lobbying for fossil fuel infrastructure rather than lobbying for transportation infrastructure that would enable my business to thrive. So you're right. Why don't I replace you, and let's see if we can have businesses like mine thrive in this area. So it's good. And the good thing is I've created enough jobs in the area that it shouldn't be an issue. Yes, Tricia?
Where does that 70% number that you just threw out come from? Because the carpetbagger tag has been thrown at a number of candidates, so it would be nice to actually have.
Yeah, so it's hard to, because we've been looking at the voting rolls, and it's very hard. It's very hard to come up with. We had to do it based on polling, which is not all that projectable. But and who votes and who doesn't vote and all that stuff. It is a great example of Republicans defining our narrative for us. For example, Sean Patrick Maloney didn't even have a residence in the district when he won. Not even an apartment. Nothing. He had nothing in the district and he won. Kirsten Gillibrand had just moved back here. It's them defining us. And when they attacked Zephyr for being not one of us, that was xenophobia, that was misogyny, And I think she got painted with that. And I think we keep allowing ourselves to get stuck. Yes?
No, I just have to say, I know this is a peculiar, like, academic thing, but the carpetbaggers during Reconstruction
Yes.
were really the most progressive folks going to the South and trying to make positive change. Now, I know you can't really go there.
James is right. By the way, thank you again for your presentation. You gave me a lot of stuff to use, by the way. James is right. But to your point, it is something that the Republicans have used to try to frame us. And the way I look at it, what people care, and we've asked this question, and by the way, we have polled this. We've asked the question, does it matter to you where someone grew up or where they went to high school? It is the 8th issue on someone's list, meaning it doesn't matter. We keep believing, we keep hearing the Republicans saying it doesn't matter. It's not a voting issue.
This is Democrats.
No, we asked more broadly. It doesn't matter to you. We didn't ask Democrats a question. We asked general.
No, but Democrats throwing out the card.
I know, because we're classic shadow boxing. We can ruin anything, right? We allow ourselves to let, they're defining us, and they're using their xenophobic, misogynist language, and we're like, oh my God, they're going to call us carpetbaggers. Again, Greene County, you're going to move there as a Democrat to run 15 years later? It's ridiculous. So we have to just, and Sean Patrick's approach to it, he never talked about it. Just wouldn't address it. If it was brought up, he would just full speed ahead. And of course, what are we doing? We keep talking about it. And he was very successful at that, yes.
I'm just going to say, Peter, I'm going to make this the last question just because I'm watching
I know,
my
I'm
time.
so sorry. That's my fault.
But isn't part of the reason you didn't live here is because you were taking care of your mother, your sick mother?
Yeah, so, yeah.
You
So,
know, as someone who took care of my wife who had
Right.
brain cancer, I find that as more noble, especially to be living in New York City. I mean, we're all country people, for the most part up here, and love it. I look at that as, I think that's fantastic, that you actually gave up the nice life here to live in New York City, to take care of your mother.
well, thank you for saying that. In fact, we'd already sold our apartment that we did have years ago, and we had to rent it. It was a night. Anybody who's dealt with Alzheimer's, it's a brutal disease, and it still is. She's just in the right care facility now, so we were able to complete our move. And we were so lucky. You know, we went. I know I've been to the New Paltz Middle School musical, which was quite impressive, I have to admit. But the 110th musical is this weekend, and it's so great to see my daughter participating. And because nobody lives there, when you're in 7th grade, you get to be in the high school musical. It's a great. I'm just saying, I'm doing a little real estate pitch here. And all those evil second homeowners provide a great tax base for us to educate our kids, so it's a great place. But it's been just terrific. We feel so lucky to be part of it. And the great thing about being in Greene County is all these people, because when you're in small towns, maybe it's not like this here, people switch back and forth between Republicans, Democrats, depending on which relative is running for an office, which is great. So I have all these lifelong Republicans for Flynn. So we've already started to get people excited. And they're like, can I sign your petition? I'm like, no, you can't really sign the petition, but I appreciate your enthusiasm, which is great. We're already appealing to all those people that we may have lost with a message about income inequality and a message about what we can do to remove barriers. Yes, one last question.
Sorry, just a logistical one. If June 26th is a primary, how soon do people need to become Democrats in order to vote?
It's too late, unless you're moving here. We'll do anything we can in New York State to prevent people from voting. It's one of the things I like. It's a state law. I like to change. We're the 4th worst in the country with our laws and voter access and all that. But yeah, it's a shame. So you can't change parties but you can vote in November, which we'll gladly have your support, or anybody you talk to. But if we're here today, if you want to carry petitions or sign a petition, we'd love your support. And thank you again, because it was in this room where it all started. So thank you.
I just want to introduce my friend Carlos. Carlos Alvarez is our videographer. He's someone who I got to know in running for office in Platicille. I got to know lots of great people, and I got to know Carlos, and he's a strong soldier for the cause, and he is an outstanding videographer. He owns On the Run Productions. And I don't know if people have seen it, I think we might show a little bit of the video during this meeting, but he videoed the rally at SUNY New Paltz the other day, and he put together a 45-minute documentary of the whole thing, and it was just really, really well done. So, and he's offered to help us out with videoing our meeting and other events and so forth. So, Carlos, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So
I'd like to just give a brief kind of update on the legislature and then open it to questions if anyone has questions. We just started our new term and we remain at a 12-11 split, 12 Republicans, 11 Democrats. But I have to say I'm really heartened with this term. All the new members actually on both sides of the aisle I think are really open to discussion on lots of issues, and therefore we're moving some new legislation that's been sitting for a long time. I just put in legislation for plastic bag ban, which would also, what we're discussing right now is a ban in combination with a fee on the alternatives, which is what's been shown to be most effective nationwide and the model that exists in California. The governor's commission came out with its report in January, and while they didn't advocate for one plan over another, they did speak to the importance of the ban. And I think probably, or I hope the state will follow, but I hope that Ulster County can get ahead of the curve, and based on the numbers and the new members, I think we can actually do it. This month, I put in a resolution to raise the the sale of tobacco products to 21. That's based on a wealth of information and medical research that shows the longer you delay exposure to smoking, the less likely you are to be a lifelong smoker and addicted. And we know the cost in terms of lives and healthcare. And so that also looks like it's going to have support. We are in the process of moving forward a comprehensive human rights law, which will be the first for Ulster County and has broad protections, and that I expect to see in the next couple months. We also just got the first presentation on what they're calling GUS, Green Ulster Sullivan Regional Solid Waste Authority. I'm very excited that this conversation is happening. Solid waste has been something I've been very intimately involved in, and surprised to be so excited about garbage. but I was very clear at the meeting that I want to see, if we're going to regionalize, I want to see it as a means to a greater end, to a contained system within our regional counties, not as a means for better bargaining for doing the same old thing, which is exporting our waste all the way to Seneca Meadows. The other counties, Greene and Sullivan, are both open. They don't do as good a job as Ulster County does, either in our recycling numbers or our financial stability in terms of solid waste, which Ulster is a model. But we do what they do in that we ship out. We just pay to remove our garbage. And when you ship your garbage far away, you're not invested in diversion, because the landfill or the alternative doesn't live in your home, and you aren't invested in keeping it as a resource for as long as possible. So that's something I really am hopeful that we're going to see happen. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
As we go?
Where does our garbage go?
It goes to Seneca Meadows, which is up by Syracuse. And Seneca Meadows is right now applied for a permit extension, and based on expert analysis, the longest that we could expect to see in Seneca Meadows is 2025. I don't remember it firsthand, but I know that because I've done a lot of research on it, this region has seen the downside of shipping garbage, in that years ago in New York City, when Pennsylvania closed its borders, the garbage was piling up to the tops of windows in New York City. And when we do that, when we just pay to have our garbage trucks far away, if you can afford it, great, but at some point, those doors might shut. And Seneca Meadows will shut, so we'll have to look for alternatives. One thing that's being discussed, just as a side, is the new facility that's proposed at Stewart Airport, which is a waste to fuel facility where they dry the solid waste, and then that solid waste becomes fuel for cement kilns. And that's something that's worth looking at. Columbia County has an amazing solid waste to compost facility, where I suggest anyone who has the opportunity to go see this facility, go. They take solid waste, diapers on the tipping room floor, and at the end, it's compost that's all sold. The whole product, and you can hold it in your hand, it has no smell whatsoever. So there's an innovative ways to deal with that, and in that facility, it came about as a result of their shrinking capacity at their landfill. So they needed to come up with an alternative in order to allow the life, and now they're actually looking at excavating their landfill and putting it through their system and extending the term of their landfill even longer. So there's some pretty exciting possibilities out there, and at least the conversation has begun. Because for a long time, Ulster suffered from the misguided way that they approached the siting of a landfill back 30 years ago, before I lived here, when they didn't involve the community and they just said, here it is, and they looked to site it at Saugerties, and there was a reaction from the host community. Hopefully we've learned from that mistake. And now environmentalists, actually at the time environmentalists were on the front lines of opposing the siting of a landfill. Now environmentalists are on the front line of saying a landfill may be one part of a sustainable option, and landfills today don't look like what they did long ago. So the regional approach might be a way that we can get there. Trying to think. The other thing that I'm working on is advocating for a comprehensive study on our jail population. Speaking of criminal justice, we don't at any given moment have a good handle of the jail population in terms of how many people are sitting unsentenced, what are their bails set at, et cetera, et cetera. And while that's not something that we can legislate, we don't have the authority, I think the information would be very compelling for our district attorneys and the public in terms of advocating for bail reform, both on a local and a national level. So that's something that I want to see happen, and I think that this term will likely be able to convince my colleagues to support the funding for. Does anyone have any questions?
This isn't a setup. Tracy doesn't know this question's coming.
Okay.
Tracy, what do you think about our current sheriff?
Okay, I did not know the question was coming, but I think I've had very kind of public disagreements with our sheriff, both on the issue of suspicionless warrant checks, which was a policy coming out of the sheriff's office where he was and maintained that it was his right to run a warrant check on every person coming into social services, and it was just social services. In the end, he agreed to step down from that policy only because I threatened the jobs in the course of the budget cycle. And I also have spoken out in terms of issues of the jail population and, again, criminal justice, and issues in terms of take-home vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I take great exception. Our sheriff, I think people remember, has been very public in asking citizens who are armed to essentially, felt to me like deputize themselves. And I think it's a totally wrong approach. So I'm pretty much the front lines of I feel like in the legislature of speaking out against the policies of our sheriff.
Two questions as it relates to that. One is, could you talk a little bit about the thing with the minors being...
Oh, yes. Yeah, so that's ongoing too. So in the course of, we get tons of documents. Sometimes we're papered with thousands and thousands of pages. And in the course of looking at the urgent contract, which urgent is the Ulster Regional Gang and Drug Task Force, I noticed that the contract allowed minors to be used as confidential informants. And I brought that up in a meeting and was told, well, this isn't a new contract. And I said, well, okay, but now I see it, so can we remove that language? Because essentially it allowed for children at 17 to be used without parental consent, and 16 and down to be used with parental consent. And again, this is in the most dangerous of circumstances. Conceivably, you're dealing with a child who's made a mistake and is now going to be put in harm's way for what end? In a gang or drug-related operation. It was frightening to me. And I've still been unable to have that language removed from the contract. Everyone at the table has said, we don't use minors. And I said, well, then let's just remove the language. And they said, no, we oppose removing the language. So it doesn't give me confidence, and it's not something I'm going to stop fighting for. And again, with this new legislature, it maybe will make a little more headway. And actually, that's something I'd like to reach out to this organization when it does come up. It would be helpful to have people come out and speak to the issue, because I know many members of this group and this audience have been to legislative meetings, but having people come and testify before the legislature does make a difference. We are reconsidering memorializing resolutions as well. So, yes. So that's potentially on the table.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is kind of an off the subject question, but restorative justice. What are your feelings on restorative justice and maybe exploring that and bringing more of that to Ulster County?
Well, we, the executive put in this budget money for which was approved by the legislature, money for a restorative justice center, which we're in the process of building. We just saw the first. I just saw the first numbers of the contracts for the center itself, and I'm very excited about it. With the raise the age, it's gonna be meaningful, and I think it's critically important. It's going to be in Kingston proper, so I think that it's really important, and I'm glad that Ulster County is kind of leading on the issue. By, as far as I know, we're one of the only counties in the state that's going to have a center dedicated strictly to restorative justice.
So where I came from in Vermont, we had communities that had boards, and so it was the first line of any kind of criminal issue, right? And then the board would decide on the not the punishment, but
the alternative,
restitution.
right?
Yeah. And so then they would also, the victim was involved, if possible, and it was really, it was a wonderful program. It's a wonderful program.
It sounds like an amazing model. I'd like to talk to you after and look at it. Find out where in Vermont you're from so that I can look at that model as well.
Okay.
A couple days ago, there was an article saying that the Dutchess County Jail had released 24 people to ICE. And we know, because we've had 2 meetings with the sheriff, the current sheriff, soon to be former sheriff, in this room, that he doesn't honor ICE detainers. He doesn't hold people extra time, but he gives them a phone call. He gives ICE a phone call whenever someone is not born in the U.S. And I know that there's a lot of conflicting information given out about how much influence the county legislature has and the county executive has over the sheriff's office. And so I'm wondering what do you see as a way forward?
So the sheriff is a duly elected officer of the county-wide, and he has constitutional authority. So the office holder can, and in this case does, make the argument that he is in charge of his own policy, that we don't dictate policy. We, the legislature, certainly not the executive, do not dictate policy to him. Where the legislature has influence is we have final control over his budget. And that's total control over his budget. So that's a powerful tool. But I also think that public and political pressure is powerful as well. And I have to say that until very recently, where issues revolved around the sheriff and the sheriff's office, the legislature and the public have remained pretty silent. For whatever reason, I mean, and again, I know just being the one person who often, I'm often voting alone. I mean, my history with the sheriff's office goes, my first term, I put in a budget amendment to get rid of the sheriff's office except for the jail. So, you know, but I'm often by myself. So I think an articulate movement that's coming and speaking to these issues specifically would be helpful. And where you and this organization have knowledge, coming to the legislature and speaking to the legislature and the legislative committee would also be helpful. Traditionally, the Law Enforcement Oversight Committee has not been so much an oversight committee as just a rubber stamp committee, and that's even evidenced by the fact that those meetings historically could last as little as 20 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It's just you're in, you're out. Okay, boom, boom, boom. So, but there, I know, I tell you firsthand, there hasn't been a lot of public input or public pressure. So I think that would be helpful.
Thank you,
Well,
Tracy.
thank you.
So one of the silver linings after November 2016 was the opportunity to get to know Tracy more, and to be able to call her a friend now with somebody who I think does an amazing job for us. And was willing to adjust her schedule, like so many other people who are here speaking today, to be here because she wanted to make sure she gave some important updates for us. And hopefully many of you will take an opportunity to go up to the county meetings. And Tracy also does come and share information at the Gardiner Democratic Committee meetings here if you want to hear more from her or ask her any other questions. And another part of the silver lining from all the November 2016 issues is I've had the opportunity to get to know Juan Fiqueroa better, and Juan is here with us today.
My name is Juan Fiqueroa, and I'm running for Ulster County Sheriff. I'm from Plattekill. The gentleman here is part of our not-for-profit, the Plattekill Latino Heritage Association. For folks that don't know, Plattekill is called the Spanish Alps, as opposed to the Irish Alps, with all the villas. They're all closed now. Actually, Carlos was a major catalyst in getting the organization, and he's the director of our communications, to send over 20 boxes of stuff that we collected at the church in Plattekill to send down to Puerto Rico after the hurricane. Thank you, Carlos. I've been in this town in Plattekill for close to 40 years. I graduated at Warfield High School, so I guess you can't really say I'm a carpetbagger. I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. I'm a retired New York State Police investigator. I'm also a retired Marine. I did 22 years in the Marine Corps. That's active duty and reserve. Graduated Warfield in '83, joined the Marine Corps, did 4 years of active duty. Been around the world to 12, not all the way around the world, but at least to 12 countries. And I will tell you that with all of our flaws, this is still the best country in the world. There's no question about it. And I serve because I found it to be a duty and a privilege to be in this great country. And it's, what my parents taught me growing up, and it's who I am. And the Marine Corps, the state police, these jobs are taken by the poor and the middle class. Let's not forget that. They come from the walks of the people that I see here today. They're your cousins, your brothers, your uncles, your friends. Sure, there are issues and flaws, but for the most part, if we come together and communicate, we can find solutions to the problems that we have. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experiences in the Marine Corps and the State Police and why I'm running for sheriff. 22 total years in the Marine Corps, mainly on the administrative side. So I moved the entire unit from point A to point B. I'm a Desert Shield, Desert Storm vet. So whenever we moved, I basically had to get up and move in one city and build another city for these Marines. I got them paid, I made sure they were trained, facilities, contracting, the budget. So I have the knowledge of running an organization of over 250 Marines. And I did that for many, many years, right here at Stewart, Newburgh, New York, for deployments, whether it was here in the United States or overseas. I had a top secret clearance, and my main job was to train the people that the Marines, to make sure that they knew what their jobs were. In the state police, I was a trooper here in Kingston, in Ulster County for about 7 years. I was a field training officer and academy instructor. I know that the towns and the roads of Ulster County because I patrol them. I know a lot of people in the Sheriff's Department. I know a lot of people in this room, and this is home. The state police, mainly my job was in the Special Investigations Unit as an investigator in the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. These are high-end investigations involving eavesdropping warrants, money laundering, narcotics, joint terrorism, organized crime, both traditional and non-traditional, identity theft. These cases involve multi-agencies, local agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, international agencies. And so I know how to communicate and get things done. That's what I did in my career in the state police. That's what I did in my career in the Marine Corps. I retired from the state police in 2013, but retirement at the age of 48 wasn't for me, so I got another job. I work for a Fortune 500 company right now, and basically I do corporate security in the Northeast. I investigate issues involving employees. I do security evaluations for buildings. I go to court for the company, both criminal and civil. They give me a power of attorney because they don't want to hire an attorney and pay $20,000 retainer. So I usually handle it. If I can't, then they hire an attorney. So that's my experience. And I bring that all to the table, including being a minority. When I ran for judge 4 years ago, I was walking out of the store one day, and one of my fellow Latinos said to me, "Juan, why would you put your name on your lawn sign? Just Fiqueroa, don't put Juan." I'm like, "Why not? That's my name." Because it's not American enough. So I hear the word carpetbagger with people that come from different parts of New York, like we spoke earlier with Brian's Flynn. But I think the issue that I have, or people think I may have, is that I'm a Latino running for office in Ulster County, which it's a predominantly Caucasian county. I worked in the state police, which is a predominantly Caucasian organization. I worked in the Marine Corps, which is a tremendously diverse organization. I will tell you that diversity is what makes us who we are. I can go anywhere when I was in the Marine Corps and there was somebody in the unit that knew how to speak the language and knew the culture. It's all pluses. And really, America has always been a place that, a place of immigrants, a place of people that come from different parts of the world because they were persecuted against or discriminated against. So to me, when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, I don't care about that. I know who I am. How much more American do you want me to be? So my mom and dad, when we moved up from the Bronx, for them, their dream was to own a home and have a family. I was taught that if there's a situation that you can do better, you can make better, then get involved. Do it. Don't be afraid. In Spanish, you used to say, no tenga miedo los paquetes, which means don't be afraid of the challenges, the big challenges in front of you. So when I think about race and the obstacles that I had in my upbringing in my job, whether it was the state police or in the Marine Corps as a chief warrant officer, the only officer that was a person of color, other individuals would come up to me and ask me questions about their situations. And if I felt that they were being wronged, I would bring it up to the attention of their officer and says, you know what, I think we should do this a certain way, and here's why. On the other hand, if the individual came in and he was saying something that I knew he was wrong, I would tell him, no, I think you're wrong, and here's why. I would tell him why. I worked through these obstacles because I was taught as a young man that it doesn't matter the color of your skin, your work ethic and who you are is what matters. And even if people are prejudiced, even if people are racist, if they work with you and they know who you are and how you work, they'll forget about all that. Because what it really means, what it is to be a human being and a person, is who you are inside. And I bring all that to the table, and this is why I'm running for Ulster County Sheriff. I believe that when you have people in office that all of a sudden put their own spin on that laws that have already been passed, that it's wrong. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, people, for example, Texas versus Johnson, U.S. Supreme Court, 1990, the burning of the American flags. That was somebody's symbolic right and their fundamental First Amendment right, that if that's what they want to do, that it's legal for them to do. When you're in a position like the sheriff's office or the sheriff himself, when you're in that position, what you say and do reflects your entire organization. And when you say things and make comments about things, it's going to be okay for certain people within your organization to say and do things when it's not. That law was already settled. Your job is to uphold the law and keep the peace. That's what your job is. And that's why I'm running for this office. I know I could do a better job. I believe in accountability, transparency. I believe that people get trained, and the purpose of training is that you get that training and you know what you should do and shouldn't do. So if you do something wrong, you're going to be held accountable. And I'm not going to let things linger like the present administration does. I like to look at situations and problems and nip it right in the butt so it doesn't happen again if there's an issue or a problem. I believe in training and accountability, and especially accountability, because the office of sheriff does not belong to Paul Van Barkland. It belongs to you, the people. And you are accountable. You should be accountable for what you say and why you are accountable. So, with that said, I am looking for your support, your endorsement, and I'm open to any questions that you may have. Questions, please. Yes, sir.
Well, you mentioned your experience, excuse me, administrative experience.
Yes.
Especially in the Marines. What do you see as the particular challenges that you would have with your organization in the Ulster County Sheriff's Office? What are the challenges there?
Well, the challenges are to change the culture, the way people think, both ways. Law enforcement needs to change the way they approach certain situations, but also people need to also think of what it takes to be an officer, what an officer does. You know, there's a lot of negative things that happen in law enforcement, sure, just like any other job. But there's also a lot of positive things that happen every single day that an officer does, whether it's changing a tire or investigating a burglary that occurred in your home. Thank you. The most important thing is to change the culture and how people in law enforcement are viewed and what their job and role is in law enforcement, which is really to help people. We're public servants. That's what we get paid to do. And it's not about me having a badge and you know, having a gun at my side, and me being better than you. On the contrary, I'm there to help you. When I was an instructor at the academy, well, I used to train the recruits were, if you treat everybody like your grandmother, you'll be just fine. And I'm a firm believer in that. You know, the job of law enforcement is to, obviously, if you do something wrong, you're going to be held accountable. We are a nation of laws. Whether you're the commander, chief, or otherwise, you basically have to be accountable if you do something wrong. And that's what law enforcement is. If we didn't have laws, we'd have chaos. And I did hear in the past, why do we have so many different agencies? I will tell you why the state police, and before I continue to say that, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. The state police was formed by 2 women in Westchester County. There was a homicide that occurred down there. And when they went to the local police agency, they were related to the people that were involved with that homicide. So the reason why the state police was developed was because we don't want local agencies with uncles, brothers, and cousins to investigate. People should have a choice of the agencies that they want to investigate. You may have a problem with the state police, and you had an issue with the state police in the past, if you don't want to contact them, well, then you can contact the sheriff's department. Same thing if it's a local agency. You know, I don't want to go to them because the person that I have a problem with is related to the chief, and I'm going to go to the sheriff's department, or I'm going to go to the state police. So there's a purpose for having multi-agencies in certain jurisdictions. I just wanted to say that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank you for stepping up. It's really, really important, and I look forward to helping your campaign.
Well, thank you.
You know, I think that I might sound like a conspiracy theorist, which I am, but I think that running against a sitting sheriff is different than running for supervisor, which I ran for and you ran for.
Yes.
Because I think it can involve a lot of risk, like really serious risk to you and your family.
Sure.
And so if there's anything that the broader public can do during your campaign to mitigate that risk, please let us know what it is.
Well, I would say I'm not really concerned about anything like that. I know a lot of people at the sheriff's department. I was approached right literally the Friday after the election by some pretty important folks in the Democratic Party. And I went and I spoke to them, and I did a lot of homework before I made my decision. I know a lot of folks in the sheriff's department, including the sheriff, because when I was a trooper, he was a sergeant. I worked up in Kingston. He was in charge of the Woodstock area. He patrolled that area. I even spoke to the sheriff, and I told him why I was running, and you know, I had a conversation with him to tell him that it's time for a change. You know, with everything that he has said and done, which everybody knows. I bring a different set of tools to the table for this office. It's a challenge. I know it's a tremendous responsibility. I have no illusions of what the office is and the responsibility that it has. But I will say that I will be responsible for the people that put me in office when I get elected. People like you, Smith.
I've worked with a civil rights lawyer, pretty well-known civil rights lawyer in this area. And one of the things he described the Ulster County Sheriff's Office as being an office of shoot now and ask later. Can you tell me about, what do you think, and I don't see that as a best practice. Can you tell us something about the best practices that you'd like to see to change, and how do you think that affects the community and the culture?
Change starts at the top. The reason why people send emails out or feel that they're okay, that are saying things, is because the leadership thinks it's okay. I will not tolerate any sort of discrimination, period. I will not tolerate any sexual harassment. I will immediately take action when something like that happens. I'm not going to let things linger. I never have, and I never will. It's not going to be overnight to change the culture in the sheriff's department, but eventually, the reason that there's training and annual types of training to put the check in the box is because if they went to that training and didn't listen to it, then they're going to be held accountable for their actions. And it's going to be immediately. It's not going to be anything that's going to go on for 9, 10 months or a year. Obviously, there are rules and unions and contracts that are in place that I would look at, but when I get involved with the county and with the union and it's time to renegotiate, then I would look at some of these things on how to best change the way we do things in law enforcement and in the sheriff's department. And I plan to do that by communicating, by educating, and accountability.
Could you, as a little follow-up, if I like?
Sure.
So then what kind of training would you want to, what would be your priority in terms of training?
The type of training basically is, well, first of all, I think it's important that we communicate with the people that we serve. Whether it's coming to meetings like this, or town board meetings, or starting a police athletic league in the county along with the other agencies, so people can, we got to knock these barriers down and walls down of people understanding what law enforcement does and what people do and how they react to law enforcement. I would do that in training, the classes, whether it's sexual harassment classes, discrimination classes, sensitivity training, and how much it costs. A lot of it will come from folks that are within the county that know and have experience with these things. Obviously, our cost is always a big thing when you do training. So the reason why training is important is because you don't want, when you have great training, it equals less liability and less lawsuits. Inherently, an organization like the Sheriff's Department or the state police or the DEA or the FBI, they're going to get sued. Things happen. Like any other job, there's a percentage of training that people get, and then there's some that just don't get it. And when that happens, you'll get sued. The problem that I see in the department now, separate from the inherent problem of getting sued when there's not proper training, is when you get sued by your own people. When you see a pattern of that, then it's time to take a look at what you as a leader, in the Sheriff's Department can do to figure out what is going on and how we can change that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I know an undocumented Mexican woman who was charged in Orange County $1,000 for some car-related tickets. They knew she wouldn't show up to court, so she was going to pay the $1,000. And I wonder if you were the sheriff, would she have been safe and would it have been appropriate for her to come to you?
The 12th Amendment states basically anybody in this country, whether you're undocumented or not, if you get pulled over by the Sheriff's Department or the state police, you can't just, because you're not a citizen or not documented, can't just rummage through their car. You still have rights. Those rights are for everyone that's in this country. This is a nation of immigrants. If we start putting people back in a box again, then what's going to happen is we're going to get organized crime, which has happened throughout, whether it's Little Italy or Chinatown. People aren't going to come to law enforcement. To me, that is a public safety issue. Why? God forbid, if one of them are driving, an undocumented person is driving, and they hit a family member, and they kill the family member, and now we know, we got the plate, we know they're from this area, and we go and investigate, no one's going to say anything because everyone's going to be afraid they're going to get sent back to their country. It's a public safety issue. We need to have lines of communications open with people that are non-documented. For example, a lot of times when you see things like this, you have issues of where you have domestic violence issues, and they're not going to call law enforcement. And to me, that's a major problem. And if you're in this county, you don't have to worry about being an undocumented immigrant and I'm going to send you back to your country. That's not the way I run business. That's not the way the state police does business either. Does that answer your question? Yes, sir.
It seems to me some of the most unfortunate encounters sometimes take place between law enforcement and people with severe mental illness. And I'm wondering, do you know of trainings to give police officers, law enforcement, people in your department to work more effectively with those folks?
Yes. Unfortunately, there are some issues with that can't be helped. If an individual has a gun, you ask them to put it down. That's one thing. I'm I'm kind of old school. If you can talk to them, bring the person down, have communicate with the individual before it gets to that next level. That's what you want to do. It's basically what you want to do is bring the situation down from, if it's here, talk to them. And obviously with mental illness, when I was a trooper, and a lot of folks, when you look at law enforcement itself, you're not just a police officer, you're a psychologist. I mean, you really have to learn how to talk to people and communicate with people. If he says, well, I see that there's a terrorist in my attic, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Why don't I go up there with you and I'll help you go get him? That type of stuff. You really have to communicate and learn how to talk with people that have mental health issues. If the individual has a bat, then you try to combat him and stop him from using that bat against somebody else. There's a match of violence that occurs where I see it in the paper all the time. There was a story in New York City a couple of years ago. The gentleman had some serious mental issues, and they're asking him to get off of the ledge. And there's a lieutenant who tells his police officer to taser him without realizing that he's going to fall down and really get hurt. So that is a lack of training. Those situations have to be talked with people that have experience, and you know, the doctors in the field of psychology, psychologists or professors. And if I can get them to train our folks, then that's what I'm going to do. To de-escalate situations is how the community is best served. But there are times when that just can't happen. It's unfortunate. Person has a knife. He's already stabbed one person. The police officer gets there. He's got to take action because he's got to protect everyone else that's in that vicinity. So training, talking with professionals, and having professionals train police officers, those first responders, is what I'm going to do if I get elected sheriff.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You were mentioning how police may confront a situation where there's someone that's armed. And I'm guessing it must be very scary for police officers to be in that situation. What are your thoughts? And I think that plays some role in things that led to Black Lives Matter and so forth. And what are your thoughts about New York State gun laws as they stand now, and of course the controversy that's stirred up now?
Well, as a sheriff, unlike the person that's in office now, the laws are laws. I'm not going to put my personal spin on things. If we need to change the laws and we need to go to our assembly, our legislator, our Congress, and get the laws changed, sensible laws that are in the books, is what I'm getting paid if I get elected to uphold. In reference to Black Lives Matters, and again, I go back to communicating. I understand as a person of color where they're coming from. Even I have been stopped by my own state police. I remember it's true. I mean, I have. I'll tell you what I did, and if it gives you an idea of who I am. So I was an undercover. I did a lot of undercover work for the state police. And I want to come back to the underage part of that urgent contract, just before I forget. That will be removed because I don't believe that law enforcement should be using underage people for criminal cases, period. I will not do that. I will remove that. And I will not allow... In 25 years in the state police, I've never done it, and I'm not going to do it now because I know, who do you think, what age group are they targeting here? So I'm not going to do that, period. It's just not going to happen. But, so as a trooper, I was an undercover. I was driving a pretty fancy car coming across Route 17 off the thruway. Our office was in a private location in Middletown where we would switch cars after we did our undercover work. And it had state police radio in the car. So I went across. There's usually a trooper that checks cars that come through. So I'm driving in a nice Audi. And I drive through and I see the troop car pull out and I get on the radio on my troop car. He's got the same frequency because it's a troop radio. He probably wasn't listening to it. He pulls me over. And I said, you hear me on the radio? He says, no. I says, all right, well, it's a troop car. He goes, I asked him, did I do something wrong? He goes, no. We've been having issues with stolen cars on 17. I'm like, okay, that's a troop car. No problem. About a week later, I'm driving another fancy car. And I get on the radio. It's the same trooper. I says, now we're going to go to the barracks because we're going to talk to your sergeant because you're a liability. You have to have a reason to stop somebody. You're not just going to stop them for no reason at all. And that's what we did. We went back and we talked to the sergeant. And I'm like, if you continue to do what you're doing, you're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to get the state police sued. What you're doing is wrong. If somebody has a tail light that's out or a light that's out, fine. But if you're just stopping cars because it's a minority that's driving a nice car, you're going to get yourself in trouble and you're going to get sued. So stop it. End of it. Of course, then we're going to stop again. But nonetheless, I understand what people of color go through because I myself have been through it. Race, like I said before, there are obstacles in every job, whether it's the state police And I'm not sure if I said this before, but I've seen people of color that use race, and they were completely wrong. They didn't have any right to do that, but they used it because it benefited them. But I've seen people that had every right to say that they were discriminated against and didn't use it. Why? Because it's going to be stuck with them their entire career and the stigma that comes with them. I was taught that, like I said before, you work around these things and you just, if people know who you are and they work and you know they know your work ethic, then race doesn't matter. But I do understand the issues of the inner cities and the problems of minorities that have what they have with law enforcement. When the economy gets better, folks don't want to be cops because they had bad experiences with being, either stopped or falsely arrested by police. I can bridge that gap because I come from a minority group. I know what it is, and I can explain to people that that are law enforcement, if I get elected, especially the sheriff's department, why people feel the way they do and how they need to communicate better with others. Bottom line with this, it's the lack of diversity is an issue, which I plan to, I'm not lowering standards by any means, but I plan to diversify the agency because it's going to be representative of the areas that they work in. It also breaks down those walls. When you have somebody that you see that can, by the way, I'm not running because I'm a minority, I'm running because I'm qualified to do the job. But when you see somebody of your own race that's a police officer that can understand the neighborhood that you're from, then that's how we start chipping away at the issues that law enforcement has with its communities. And I forgot if I even answered that question, did I answer?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank you for running.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, sir.
What would you do different to work with the juveniles in the county to maybe stem some of the juvenile crime problem that we have?
I will personally go to schools and I will direct people within the department to go to schools and have the schools make them part of their curriculum. The police athletic league, not only with the sheriff's department, but the other agencies in the county. I think it's important that we all work together because it's important that you don't want to always be as a county or the state police or the FBI as a big brother. You want to be able to understand your local community, and the only way you can do that is by reaching out to the local law enforcement folks. Something like a police athletic league is one way, but actually going to schools, seminars, talking about, even job fairs for that matter. Kids want to do something in the future. I'm a prime example of why this is such a great country and why there are opportunities in this country to do and be whatever you want if you put your mind to it. I know how difficult it is for a minority to make it in an agency like the state police. Because it's easier for them to get arrested than it is of somebody who isn't a minority. But I would stress the importance of why it's so important to do certain things in life. And I don't mind going to the schools. I think, as a matter of fact, I'm going to make it part of my agenda to have people within the department to go to these. If you ask, you say, hey, Juan, can I get someone to come to the school? You can have somebody to show up, including myself. And because my job is to represent the people of this county and break down those barriers, especially with our youth.
A follow-up to my first question, could you imagine allowing undocumented citizens of Ulster County to get a driver's license? That was part of this woman's problem.
Why?
They do in California.
I don't see a problem with that at all. Wouldn't you want somebody to have a license to drive in this state? Absolutely. I will use the office, if elected, to push certain ideals that are representative of the community that I represent. Thoughts like yours, thoughts on sensible, gun laws. Like when we talk about AR-15s, nobody should have an AR-15. No teacher should be told that I'm gonna, on top of your, you know, the tremendous responsibility of teaching our youth, on top of that, I want you to get a gun to protect them. That's what you pay law enforcement to do. That's what our job is. You know, and I look at the situations of what's going on in today, and I just scratch my head in disbelief. I will use this office to push the sensible, you know, rules and laws that we want to be put in place. I would work with Tracy, and I know Tracy for many, many years. I would work with Tracy to make things better in this county, because isn't that what we're supposed to do? Why are we reverting back to things that happened in the past? Aren't we supposed to leave this place better when we all leave? You know, life is short, and that's what I intend to do. And that's why I'm running for Ulster County Sheriff.
Yeah.
I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that the Ulster County Sheriff's Office runs the jail, the county jail.
That's correct.
Can you think of, identify some things that you would like to be doing in the jail to make the situation there different for those who stay there? And
Yeah, can you speak up and repeat
well,
that?
would you think of anything that you would be doing, you could do to make it different for those who are in the jail?
I actually have some really good ideas about that. You know, it has to do with having a relationship with business owners, the county legislature. What I want to do is I want to set up some sort of certification process for people that are in jail. If we don't start changing the way we do things, it's just going to be a repetitive cycle. So the first thing I would do, obviously, is if they don't have a high school diploma, let's get them in the time that they're there, let's get them a GED. There are programs that are there now. But with that, there's going to be a process of how I can give this individual a certification and reach out to that business guy, the business leaders and owners in this community, that they can hire these people. And if we can find a way, working through the legislature and the assembly and the state, to give these businesses tax breaks for hiring people that go to jail, then that's something I'm willing to do and looking to do. Set up some sort of process, working with folks like you, working with the county legislator, to get a system in place so we can say, well, this person accomplished all these goals while he was there. He made a mistake, but let's give him a second chance. Can you give him a job? And if you give him a job, what's in it for the business? And that's where folks like Tracy, folks in the Congress, in the Assembly, somehow can get them either tax breaks or something for doing what they're doing, if we all work together, so it's not a big repetitive process of these people showing up in jail every 6 months. Because what are they to, if they don't get hired, if they don't get and I'm not talking about a minimum wage job, I'm talking about a job that help them pay their bills in the homes that they live in. If we can't get them jobs, then it starts at you know, in the jail, because they're obviously there because they did something wrong. So while we have them there, why not set up a process to help them, so when they get out, we can get them a job and they don't have to come back again. I mean, isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing as a society, making things better for people? And that's what I'm on with. That's what I want to do. Yes, ma'am.
So how do you feel about legalizing marijuana?
I don't have an issue with that. For years, you know, it's being legalized throughout the country already. You know, sometimes they call it a gateway drug. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think the opioid issue is a major problem. By the way, my background in narcotics and money laundering is mainly on the business side of it. I went after the cartels, both in Colombia and in cartel. New York City is one of the biggest user cities in the country, and the drugs would be sent on consignment there and then spread out throughout the Hudson Valley. So those people that were arrested, those business people, are no different than the people that are pushing these opioid drugs as a chronic drug relief pain. And they're letting them get addicted, and then once they can't get those pills, they're going to turn to drugs like heroin. That's why heroin is making a big comeback. So I believe they should be taken to task by suing these companies, and we can take that money and help these people that need help. We cannot arrest ourselves out of this issue. It affects everybody. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. So, was that, did that answer your question?
Sure it does.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, thank you for having me here today. Thank you.